Hello and welcome to Upper Pen. My name is Dakota, and today I am talking with Catriona Silvey about her newest book, Love and Other Paradoxes.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for joining me, Catriona.
Thanks so much for having me.
Can you tell folks a little bit about what Love and Other Paradoxes is about?
Sure. Love and Other Paradoxes is a time travel rom-com. It's about a guy called Joe who is an undergraduate student at Cambridge University, and he has big dreams, ridiculously big dreams of becoming a famous poet of all things. Um, Little does he know that actually in the future these dreams are going to come true. He becomes a huge deal to the point where there's actually a time traveling tour that comes back to his present to see him before he was famous. One of these time travelers, Essie, accidentally spills the beans to Joe about his future. And the kind of fun twist is that she is actually not into him or his poetry at all. She thinks he's extremely overrated and she's in the past for her own reasons. So what ensues is basically time travel shenanigans. There's a bit of a love triangle because Joe also meets the woman who's going to be his future muse, who inspires his poetry, but he sort of starts to fall in love with Essie as well, and the future might be going off the rails. So yeah, time travel romance, all in a kind of light academia type setting.
I loved Essie and her snark at the very beginning. Oh my gosh, she did not want to talk to him.
She is so deeply unimpressed with him, and I hope that readers would enjoy that. Yeah.
She's quite funny throughout the book too, but how did you come up with this time travel rom-com idea?
I mean, to me, I'm surprised there aren't more time travel rom-coms. I know there's a few, right? They do exist. So one that I enjoyed recently was The 7 Year Slip by Ashley Poston. They exist in like book form, they exist in film form. About Time is probably the most famous one. Palm Springs is my personal favorite, but don't get me started on Palm Springs because I'll talk about it forever. But it just seems like a really natural pairing to me. Because I mean, time travel I find inherently ridiculous. I know there are serious takes on time travel, but just with the way that it scrambles your brain to think about it, I just find that funny. I just really enjoy a rom-com, and so bringing those two things together made total sense to me. But maybe it only makes sense in my brain. I don't know.
No, it makes perfect sense, especially here. So I would get caught up when I was writing or thinking too much about the timeline and paradoxes. Did you ever find yourself having to be like, just stop thinking about that?
Yeah, so this book went through many drafts, many drafts. And I mean, I'm a huge time travel nerd, and I think in earlier drafts, maybe too much of that was coming through on the page. So my editors, my poor long suffering editors, had to keep reminding me, this is a rom-com. You don't need. There was actually a scene where one of the characters, Rob, who's Joe's best friend and is also a physicist, actually had a whiteboard and he was going through the different models of time travel on this whiteboard. And crazily enough, I don't know why my editors thought that I needed to cut that scene. And yeah, they were absolutely right. There was a little bit too much overthinking of time travel mechanics in early drafts. So I had to pare it down to the point where I think a casual reader probably might not realize I'm a huge time travel nerd, which hopefully means I've succeeded. But yeah.
Well, so I feel like Rob was probably the best outlet for that because he's a very good, like, he's kind of a ridiculous person a lot of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I kind of wish that there were like, you know how there's deleted scenes in movies, or there used to be? I really
Yeah.
wish there were those for these types of situations.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could like put them up on my website. Would just be like for the people who really wanted Rob to do a lecture, you know. And I could even include the visuals of like, here's the diagrams he drew. Yeah, that could be fun.
You actually drew the diagrams.
I may have drawn the diagrams, yeah. I mean, as I may have mentioned, I am a huge time travel nerd, so yeah.
Okay, so stepping away from time travel for a second, kind of. Joe's future muse is
Mhm.
Diana.
Yeah.
Um, I
What to
don't
say
love
about Diana?
I don't love her, so it's so hard to talk about her. And it's probably because I like Essie so much, like
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's as but like usually going into a romance, you know who is endgame, right? And if
Yeah.
you don't know that from early on, then the writer's probably doing it wrong. So, you're not supposed to be 100% on board with Diana, but again, this book went through so many drafts. She was so much worse in previous drafts. Like honestly, I had to work really quite hard to think about what makes her tick, what makes her do the things she does. And I hope that by the end of the book, even if you don't like her, you kind of get a sense of why she's made the choices she has and why she's so fixated on her particular future. But yeah, she's spiky and quite egocentric. But you know, all the characters are kind of selfish in their own way. Some of them are just a bit more lovable when doing it. They're in their early 20s. Like you tend to be quite focused on your own journey at that age, or at least that was my experience.
Well, also, I feel like Joe kind of, because he finds out that this is going to be his muse, he
hmm
tries to pursue her at a
hmm
very early stage of their lives, which doesn't really, they don't really mesh well.
Yeah, yeah. So I love that idea of like that you could meet the potential future right person at the wrong time in your life, or that you know, there's so many different versions of yourself you could end up being depending what happens to you in your life. And so depending on those decisions you make, you could have two diametrically opposed people who would be the right person for you in 20 years' time, right? So that was kind of where I was going with that, that even if they could make sense in some version of Joe's future, in the present, like he's a total nerd and she's like in the popular crowd and yeah, just having fun with that kind of clash. But as you say, as he's desperately trying to make it work.
And even Diana, closer to the end, she's like, this is not like it's not really meshing very well. So I love that they're self-aware of this, and like the book itself is very self-aware of the forced nature.
Yeah, I mean, I have lots of complex feelings about the idea of like your one destined love with big, scary air quotes. I mean, it's a trope that a lot of people love, so I don't want to say like, you know, for some people that's something they enjoy. I've always hated that in stories, the idea that there's this one person and just because fate says so, you have to be together. My instinct is like, well, I'm gonna try and mess that up because it's more interesting if something, at least to me, it's more interesting if something is unexpected, if it's something that like maybe shouldn't even have happened, but it's happening now, so you kind of roll with it. That's where I tend to have fun as a writer.
It so the fun comes off quite a bit here.
Good, I'm glad.
One of the best scenes is very early, in my opinion, where Joe is trying to get away from Essie after he steals the future book of his poems, and
Mhm.
he jumps onto Rob's gondola boat thing.
Yeah, his
Just
punt, yeah.
it's just such a like out of left field type of scene.
Well, this was the fun of setting it in Cambridge because I mean that's a city that I've lived in many times during my life, and it's a ridiculous place. It's completely absurd. And one of the absurd things is there's a river going through the center of town that the only things next to it are these beautiful old colleges, and the only way you can be on it really is in these really slow moving, like clunky wooden boats. They're not, I mean, they are sort of like gondolas, but they're like the less cool version of gondolas. So you don't look cool when you're pushing a punt along. So I just love the idea of a punt chase because it would just not be dramatic in any sense at all. So yeah, I have fallen in that river as well. I escaped without catching any diseases, which was lucky because it is quite polluted.
I can't imagine going in any city river.
Yeah, it's a bad idea. It was not intentional. This was a mistake. Yeah.
Um, when you were writing this, would did you have trouble with when you wanted to tell people what things? Because it seems like time travel is immediate.
Mm.
So release of information, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you've basically hit the nail on the head of what was so difficult about revising this book. Because in early drafts, I was just trying to give the reader all the information right at the beginning. And not only was that just an overwhelming, boring info dump, like with the whiteboard scenes, it was also robbing the book of any tension, right? Because if you tell the reader, you know, this is what's happening, this is how time travel works, this is where the characters are going, they're like, why should I bother reading the rest of the book, right? So I realized that I could solve the kind of avoiding over-explaining the time travel mechanics problem and the lack of tension problem in the same way by, yeah, just really trying to intentionally parcel out information through the book in a way that hopefully keeps the reader more engaged. So yeah, that's something I'm still learning how to do, basically.
You did really good with that with Essie in particular, because her story is kind of woven pretty much throughout, but you don't get
Mhm.
it for quite a bit into it.
Yeah, yeah, and I hope that that would kind of keep the reader engaged in terms of, Joe wants to know more, the reader wants to know more, but she is quite a reticent person. She's very private, and she has many, many reasons for not wanting to share her whole story at the beginning. So, yeah.
Did you always have this iteration of these four characters, Joe and Essie, Rob, and Diana?
Yeah, they were sort of core to it from the beginning. I did have quite a few extra characters who got binned along the way, again with the extremely overwritten early drafts. My editors were like, "Do we need any of these people?" I'm like, "Not really, no." So, so yeah, but they were there. Those four were there from the start, and they were fundamentally the same people they are in the final version. I think it's just the kind of showing who they are to the reader. Well, except Diana was much worse, but yeah, apart from that.
You just got to know her better. It's fine.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. Yeah, she was tricky to get to know. I had to find what makes her relatable, and that was hard because it's like, oh, I don't want to be like her, but we have to find this like common ground somehow.
It's very fair. It's so easy to just make people like unlikable completely. So
Yeah, and I actually really like writing characters who are not so likable. I think Essie and Joe are both quite lovable in their own way, even though Joe is an idiot. I think that actually kind of helps with his likability. But I also like writing a spiky character. I like writing a character who rubs people the wrong way and says the wrong thing all the time and just doesn't care. That's just very freeing because I'm not let sort of I care a lot about what people think, and so I'm very careful about what I say. So sometimes writing someone who just doesn't is very liberating.
I can definitely feel that. I do not like confrontation in my life.
No, yeah, yeah. Just put it all in books and then it's fun and at a distance, yeah.
Perfect, perfect. Um, did you ever want to structure the book in a different way so that, like, because it's a time travel book, you could
Mhm.
jump around quite a bit.
Yeah, so oh man, I'm just every time I remember how many drafts when you have a book that you're happy with the final version, you sometimes forget all of the previous ones. And these questions are really bringing it back because there was an entire subplot where not a subplot, it was part of the whole climax where time collapsed and sort of different historical eras started appearing. And it was a lot of fun to write, but it had absolutely nothing to do with the plot of the rest of the book. Again, like rom-com, 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 time is collapsing, So yeah, there was a proper time travel scene. There was a scene where they went into the future. I mean, they went for an extended period into the future. I don't want to spoil the end of the book. But there was also a scene where they went into a specific era in the past. All of that is gone. So again, deleted scenes, maybe someday.
It just seems so easy to fall into the trap of like, I don't want to release this information now, so I'll have Essie doing it, and then we'll jump back, like
Yeah, 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 exactly. So I tried to, yeah, just kind of keep it simple and resist the temptation to. I mean, also just because time travel makes everything possible, it doesn't mean you should do everything, right? So, yeah.
yeah, that's okay.
Another book, maybe in the future.
So along with I'm assuming your years of enjoying time travel movies is considered research, because
Oh, yeah.
that's what I'm calling it.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Serious research.
Um, you talk a lot about poetry in the book,
Mhm.
and was it tempting to put Joe's poems in to like try and write
I
these
mean, it
poems?
was actually the opposite. Early drafts, there was no poetry. So the final version of the book has one complete poem that's not from his glorious future. So it's okay if it's not that good. And like a couple of fragments from his supposedly amazing future poems. And I resisted for so long putting any poetry in the book because I'm not a poet. And I just had huge imposter syndrome about it. But again, it was one of my editors who was just like, it would be really great if there could be something that he writes in the present that is only there because he's like met Essie and his timeline has changed. It doesn't have to be a poem, or does it? And I was like, no, don't make me write a poem. But I'm so glad that she pushed me to do that because I was happy with how it came out, and it was a challenge because, as I said, I'm not a poet, but I just pretended I was Joe, and that seemed to help. Like, pretend you're a poet, and maybe a poem will come out.
Did you put on your dodgiest sweater and you're like, I'm Joe now?
Yeah, yeah, full on like cosplay, total immersion, method acting. Yeah.
Um, so that it's kind of funny because that's how the book opens is Joe's looking at is it Byron? I want to say,
Yeah, it's Lord Byron, yeah.
yeah, who is not overrated at all.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, hopefully the reader is kind of laughing at Joe a little bit there, but yeah, he's staring up at this insane marble statue and just going, I want to be that. And you're like, is that the best goal?
No, 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 to be anybody else.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so I love that the book is so self-aware in this and the way
Mhm.
it's written.
Yeah, I mean, I did a degree in English literature at Cambridge, so I had to read a lot of these guys, and I liked quite a lot of it. I did enjoy my time, and it was actually an amazing opportunity to kind of be forced to read all of the classics, basically. But there's also a kind of absurdity to it, and to Cambridge as a place, I found that it's very I mean, it's not controversial, I think, to say it's stuck in the past. Um, but at the same time, when you're an undergraduate student, you're very aware of your immediate future, rushing down on you. When graduation is approaching, you're terrified, like you don't know what you're going to do with your life. So, that's another reason I think um, the book set in Cambridge had to be a time travel book because it just felt like that collision of the weight of the past, which everyone is valuing much more than they maybe should, and the kind of pressure of the future and the need you feel to do something important with your life when you're in your early 20s, whereas usually later you settle down a bit and like it's okay, I can just live.
It's funny that you mention how ridiculous it seems. So I went to an MFA, and
Mhm.
I got one in creative writing. And my husband described this and archaeology, but that's a whole separate story, as a pyramid scheme where you're basically teaching other people to teach other people to write. And it's just this.
Wow. I mean, I guess in a sense he's not wrong. That's brutal. Wow. I
It
mean,
was,
archaeology, I would argue, I don't know. I tend to be quite down on like English literature because that's what I studied. But archaeology, they're discovering stuff about the past, right? In theory.
yeah, his was like Egyptologists literally work on pyramids, so it's literally a pyramid
I
scheme.
get it. Yeah.
Um,
Nice.
and the only places that it's really, really valued is in universities. And this kind of
Mm,
like, um, when I was going to school, I really realized there is a disconnect between universities and like the outside world.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Um,
go
and
ahead.
the thing about especially places like I don't know Cambridge, Oxford, the Ivy League, that kind of place, is that sometimes they almost encourage you to never leave. So it would have been entirely possible to just stay, do a master's, do a PhD, teach there, never go anywhere else, never get any other experience, even in another university, like let alone outside of academia. Yeah, I am quite interested in that disconnect. I have been a researcher, I have been an academic, but I've also worked outside of academia, and I think that can be quite valuable to have both those perspectives, even if you choose research as your like long-term career, because otherwise you can sometimes get into the kind of bubble thinking.
Well, so you really kind of exemplify that with Rob and Joe, because Joe is very much caught up in his end of the year. Where is he going to go? You
Hmm.
know, this kind of weighty feeling. And then there's Rob who's playing assassin
Yeah,
and is like, dude, things happen. You'll be fine.
yeah.
Um, at least that's the vibe I get from Rob is just a
Yeah, but he I don't know, I feel like he is inspired by some people that I knew at Cambridge who just seem to be able to do everything effortlessly. So like he's getting a first and he's probably going to do a PhD and stuff, but he appears to not work at all. And there are people like that, and I want to know how they do it.
I don't understand how most people have the time of day to do anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are you working on next, if anything?
So right now I am editing what will hopefully be my third published book. And it's completely different. It's quite dark. It's a sort of gothic, psychological horror adjacent book set in a cult. So it's really weird to go from the headspace of editing that and being like in this very dark headspace to talking about Love and Other Paradox. It's like, yay, love time travel. So it's been fun switching back and forth, but it's kind of nice in a way to have that balance. Yeah, so working on that, really enjoying it.
Have you pitched it to people yet?
So it is we haven't announced it yet, but it is has sold in the US, so it will
Okay.
be published probably in 2026. But yeah, I assume I'm allowed to say that even though it hasn't been announced yet. But yeah. So I hope that readers will kind of go with me. If there are people who have enjoyed Love and Other Paradoxes and are looking for the next thing by me, they won't be completely put off by the fact that it's entirely different. Hopefully there will be some core of similarity somewhere there.
So there are a few authors that do that though, like T. Kingfisher in my is
Yes.
the one that I think if she
Mhm.
does like all these silly rom-com-y books and then she does these dark kind of like psychological.
Yeah. I mean, I like that is career goals for me. And if I can find a way to make that work, I would be ecstatic because I love to write all different kinds of books. So if I could have like the happy strand and the dark strand, or like the more SF strand and the more fantasy strand, like all of that would make me very happy. I love to write lots of different things.
What was your first book?
My first published book,
Yeah.
yeah, so that was Meet Me in Another Life. And that was, yeah, I guess kind of like Love and Other Paradoxes in that it was science fiction adjacent, but focused on kind of characters mainly in their everyday lives. But not like Love and Other Paradoxes in that it is not a rom-com. It has made people cry a lot, so please be wary if if you're going into it after Love and Other Paradoxes. But it's basically the story of two people, Thora and Santi, who meet each other again and again in different versions of their lives. And they each time relate to each other in different ways. So sometimes they're friends, sometimes they're colleagues, sometimes they're lovers. And they have to initially they don't remember, but they start to remember fragments of their previous lives filtering through, and they have to work together to figure out what's going on and how they can break the cycle. So, yeah.
Ooh, okay. So I will have to put that on my to be read list.
But yes, warning, not a rom-com. Just I feel like I have to klaxon that just for reader's safety.
Well, fair, fair. I forgot what I was gonna say. I
I
really
can
am
just stop.
excited. I'm excited that you're gonna try out like a darker story though, because this could have gone real dark.
Oh yeah, and again, there were some darker elements in previous versions that got all kind of smoothed out to turn it into the rom-com that it was always intended to be. So yeah, now if I can have like a strand of dark books, I can put all the dark stuff in there and avoid messing up my rom-coms in future.
No, it's fine.
Sprinkling of darkness is fine, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for talking with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been really fun.
And if anybody out there hasn't read Love and Other Paradoxes, it is quite the romp. It's very fun and very ridiculous at times.
Oh yeah. Yes,
Uh,
intentionally ridiculous. Please enjoy.
well, thank you so much again, and everybody out there, have a great day.